Hello, welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore one of the most heart-wrenching and terrifying moments in Salem's recent history, Johnny DiMera and Chanel Dupper Dimra's joyous adoption celebration that transforms into a parent's worst nightmare when their precious baby Tesoro falls dangerously ill. The celebration of new beginnings. The DiMera mansion radiates warmth and happiness as Johnny DiMera and Chanel Dupper Dimra prepare to celebrate the most significant milestone of their young-lived official adoption of baby Tesoro, who will soon be lovingly renamed Trey, also known as John III, in heartfelt tribute to the legendary John Black. The couple has meticulously planned every detail of this momentous celebration, transforming their home into an enchanting wonderland filled with pastel decorations, elegant floral arrangements cascading from every surface, and a magnificent three-tier cake adorned with delicate sugar sculptures of baby booties and rattles. Family members from both the prestigious DiMera clan and the proud Price Carver family have gathered in force, their faces glowing with genuine joy and unwavering support for the young parents embarking on this beautiful new chapter. Chanel has poured her heart and culinary expertise into creating a spectacular menu featuring signature dishes from her beloved bakery, including miniature cupcakes decorated with tiny fondant pacifiers and her famous sweet potato pie that guests have been raving about for years. Johnny, ever the romantic filmmaker with an eye for capturing precious moments, has arranged for professional photographers and videographers to document every second of their son's official welcome home celebration. The atmosphere crackles with anticipation and pure, unbridled joy as guests arrive bearing thoughtfully wrapped gifts and warm wishes for the newly expanded family who have fought so hard to reach this day. Complex emotions behind smiling faces. Beneath the surface of celebration and champagne toasts, profoundly complex emotions swirl among several attendees who form deep, irreplaceable attachments to little Tesoro during his tumultuous journey to finding his forever home. Leo Stark and Javi Hernandez, who served as the infant's devoted foster parents for several emotionally charged weeks, struggle valiantly to maintain their composure as they watch Johnny and Chanel officially become Trey's legal parents in the eyes of the law. While both men genuinely celebrate the baby finding such a loving, stable, and financially secure home with parents who will provide every advantage. The sharp pain of separation cuts far deeper than either anticipated when they first agreed to foster the abandoned child. Leo, typically known throughout Salem for his sharp wit, theatrical dramatics, and carefully crafted emotional armor, finds his eyes unexpectedly welling with tears he cannot suppress as he cradles Trey one final time before handing him to his new parents. Javi wraps a supportive, protective arm around his partner's trembling shoulders, both men understanding with painful clarity that this goodbye, though absolutely necessary and undeniably right for Tesoro's future, leaves an aching void in their hearts that no amount of rationalization can fill. They exchange knowing glances filled with shared grief, silently acknowledging that a piece of their hearts will forever belong to this tiny boy who briefly made them feel like fathers. Ariana Ari Horton has also grown profoundly and unexpectedly attached to the adorable infant during his extended stay with her family, spending countless late-night hours rocking him to sleep, singing soft lullabies her grandmother taught her, and marveling at his tiny fingers wrapping around hers. The compassionate young woman experiences her own quiet, dignified grief as she watches Trey being celebrated and passed around among his new extended family, knowing she must now gracefully step back and allow Johnny and Chanel to build their crucial parental bond without interference from those who cared for him temporarily. Aaron Green stands nearby against the ornate wall, his handsome face displaying a complicated mask of conflicting emotions as he continues grappling with his monumental, life-altering decision to sign away his paternity rights to the child who carries his DNA but will never call him father. Ari notices Aaron's troubled expression and the way his jaw clenches when he watches other people hold the baby, so she quietly moves closer to offer comfort and understanding, creating a tender moment between two people united by their shared love for the tiny boy who has touched so many lives in his brief time on Earth. She gently reassures Aaron that he made the right choice, that Trey will have opportunities and advantages they could never provide, and that his sacrifice was the ultimate act of selfless love. Matriarchs unite in blessing. Paulina Price and Marlene Evans, two of Salem's most formidable, respected, and beloved matriarchs, share a profoundly moving and spiritually significant bonding session during the celebration as they officially welcome young Trey into their intertwined family legacy that spans generations. Paulina, practically radiating grandmother pride from every pore, cannot contain her infectious excitement about having another precious grandchild to spoil rotten, shower with gifts, and fill with stories about his remarkable heritage. Marlene reflects with bittersweet emotion on the beautiful, poignant continuation of John Black's extraordinary legacy through this innocent child who now bears his name and will carry forward his memory to future generations. The two powerful women embrace warmly, their friendship strengthened and deepened by this shared joy, as they enthusiastically discuss elaborate plans for future family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and the important roles each will play in shaping Trey's upbringing and character development. They promise each other to ensure this child knows he is cherished, protected, and part of something greater than himself. Strained congratulations and hidden agendas. E.J. DiMera approaches his son and daughter-in-law with measured, carefully calculated congratulations. His aristocratic demeanor and practiced smile barely concealing the complicated turmoil brewing beneath his polished surface. While he genuinely wishes happiness and prosperity for Johnny and Chanel, understanding their desperate desire to become parents, E.J. remains bound by his solemn, legally binding promise to Amy Choi to maintain appropriate distance from his newborn nephew and strictly refrain from interfering in the child's life or upbringing decisions. This enforced separation from family, this deliberate exclusion from yet another DiMera heir's life, troubles E.J. more profoundly than he would ever care to admit publicly, creating annoying frustration and bitter resentment that shadows his otherwise pleasant exterior throughout the celebration. His complicated, unresolved feelings about being systematically excluded from Trey's life will later find unexpected solace and understanding through Gwen von Leuschner, who comprehends the excruciating pain of family complications, rejection, and being considered unworthy of familial connection better than most people in Salem. Meanwhile, beneath the celebration's joyful veneer, E.J.'s mind continues churning with plans for the clandestine laboratory experiments he's been orchestrating behind closed doors with the notorious Dr. Wilhelm Rolf. The nightmare begins. Just as the party reaches its emotional peak and Johnny prepares to offer a heartfelt, carefully prepared toast thanking everyone for their unwavering love and support during their adoption journey, the celebration takes a horrifying and completely unexpected turn that will haunt every parent present for years to come. Baby Tesoro, who has been contentedly passing from one loving family member to another throughout the afternoon, suddenly begins displaying alarming symptoms that send immediate panic through both his new parents. Chanel notices first when she reclaims her son for feeding his normally warm, peachy skin feels unnaturally hot to the touch, almost burning her fingers, and his breathing sounds labored and distressingly irregular. Within minutes, Tesoro's temperature spikes to dangerous levels, his tiny body convulses with violent shivers despite the summer warmth, and his usual bright, alert eyes glaze over with the unmistakable fog of serious illness. His plaintive cries escalate to piercing screams of agony that cut through the celebration's happy chatter like a knife, immediately silencing the room and drawing every guest's horrified attention. Johnny's face drains of color as he watches his newborn son, suffering in his wife's arms, unable to provide any comfort or relief. Chanel's professional nursing instincts kick in immediately as she begins assessing symptoms. The baby's skin develops frightening red blotches, spreading across his delicate chest. His breathing becomes dangerously shallow and rapid, and he exhibits clear signs of severe dehydration despite having nursed normally just an hour earlier. The terrified mother shouts for someone to call emergency services immediately while she begins basic first aid, desperately trying to bring down his skyrocketing fever. Medical crisis unfolds. Paramedics arrive with impressive speed, but precious minutes feel like agonizing hours to the traumatized parents hovering over their critically ill son. The emergency medical technicians work with practiced efficiency, checking vital signs, administering oxygen through a tiny infant mask, and establishing for access in Tesoro's impossibly small veins while firing rapid questions at Chanel and Johnny about the baby's medical history, recent exposures, feeding patterns, and behavioral changes. The couple can barely process the questions through their panic-stricken fog, clutching each other desperately as strangers work to save their child's life on what should have been the happiest day of their lives. The lead paramedic's grave expression communicates the situation's severity without words as he informs Johnny and Chanel that Tesoro requires immediate hospitalization for emergency intervention and comprehensive testing to determine the illness's cause. The celebration dissolves instantly into chaos as guests frantically gather belongings, parents rush to secure their own children, and family members demand to accompany the baby to the hospital. Johnny and Chanel, moving as if underwater through a nightmare they cannot wake from, follow the gurney carrying their precious son to the waiting ambulance. Their celebration decorations, an untouched cake forgotten in the wake of genuine crisis. Leo and Javi, despite their earlier emotional farewell, insist on driving to the hospital immediately, unable to abandon the child they cared for during his most vulnerable weeks. Ari breaks down crying in Aaron's arms, both young people devastated that something terrible is happening to the innocent baby they helped nurture. Paulina and Marlene exchange worried glances, their earlier joy completely evaporated, replaced by the cold dread that only grandmothers facing a critically ill grandbaby can understand. Hospital vigil and desperate searches for answers. The University Hospital Emergency Department becomes ground zero for the DiMera and Price Carver families' anguished vigil as doctors work frantically to stabilize baby Tesoro and identify the mysterious illness ravaging his tiny body. Kayla Brady, serving as attending physician and drawing on decades of medical experience, orders an extensive battery of tests including blood cultures, spinal tap to rule out meningitis, comprehensive toxicology screening, and advanced imaging to check for internal complications. Each test result brings more questions than answers, with doctors initially baffled by the constellation of symptoms that don't fit any standard pediatric illness pattern. Johnny paces the waiting room like a caged animal, his filmmaker's mind torturing him with worst-case scenarios and images of a future without his son. Chanel sits motionless, still wearing her beautiful celebration dress now stained with her baby's vomit and her own tears. Mentally reviewing every single moment of the party, trying to identify what could have caused this catastrophic illness. Did someone give him something? Did he touch something toxic? Was there something wrong with his formula? The questions spiral endlessly with no satisfactory answers. EJ arrives at the hospital despite his promise to maintain distance, unable to stay away when his nephew fights for life, and immediately begins making calls to specialists worldwide, using every DiMera resource and connection to ensure Tesoro receives the absolute best care available. Abe Carver sits with Paulina, who prays quietly while clutching her daughter's hand, both parents understanding too well the helpless agony of watching your child suffer. The entire family huddles together in the sterile waiting room, united in their desperate hope and collective fear. The devastating diagnosis. After hours of testing that feel like an eternity, Kayla emerges from the treatment area with an expression that makes every heart in the waiting room sink with dread. She gently explains that Tesoro has contracted a severe, rare viral infection possibly transmitted during the adoption celebration by an asymptomatic carrier among the many guests who held and kissed the baby throughout the afternoon. The virus, which causes minimal symptoms in healthy adults, proves devastating to infants with underdeveloped immune systems, attacking multiple organ systems simultaneously and requiring aggressive treatment protocols. The diagnosis hits Johnny and Chanel like physical blows to their celebration, meant to welcome their son into their lives and community. Instead exposed him to the pathogen that now threatens his survival. The guilt crushed them both, with Chanel sobbing that she should have been more protective, should have limited who could hold him, should have seen the symptoms earlier. Johnny blames himself for insisting on such a large celebration, for wanting to show off their son to everyone in Salem rather than keeping the event small and intimate. Kayla quickly reassures them that they bear no fault. This type of viral transmission is unpredictable and virtually impossible to prevent when gathering with other people. She explains that Tesoro will require hospitalization for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer depending on his response to antiviral medications and supportive care. The next 72 hours will prove critical in determining whether his tiny body can successfully fight the infection or whether complications will develop that could cause permanent damage or worse outcomes. She cannot bring herself to explicitly state. Family bonds tested and strengthened. The crisis surrounding baby Tesoro's life-threatening illness becomes a crucible that both tests and ultimately strengthens the bonds between Salem's interconnected families in unexpected ways. Leo and Javi, who officially have no legal relationship to the child anymore, refuse to leave the hospital despite Johnny and Chanel's gentle suggestions that they go home and rest. The foster fathers explain that their love for Tesoro doesn't disappear simply because adoption papers transferred legal custody fee, need to know he survives this nightmare, need to be present offering whatever support the new parents might need during the darkest hours. Aaron Green experiences a profound spiritual crisis. He watches the biological son he voluntarily relinquished fighting for survival in a hospital incubator, wired to machines monitoring every heartbeat and breath. He confesses to Ari, through broken tears, that he wonders if his decision to sign away paternity somehow cursed the child. If the universe is punishing an innocent baby for his cowardice in not stepping up to be a father. Ari firmly reminds him that his decision was motivated by love and the desire to give Tesoro the best possible life. The universe doesn't work that way, and this illness is cruel random chance, not cosmic punishment for difficult choices. Paulina and Marlene maintain an around-the-clock presence at the hospital, taking shifts so that Johnny and Chanel always have emotional support nearby when the fear becomes overwhelming. The matriarchs bring food the young parents cannot eat, offer shoulders for tears that seem endless, and provide the steady reassurance that only grandmothers who have survived their own children's medical crises can authentically give. Their presence becomes an anchor, keeping Johnny and Chanel from completely fragmenting under the crushing weight of their terror, uncomfortable questions, and unexpected suspects. As Tesoro remains critically ill despite aggressive medical intervention, hospital administrators and public health officials begin investigating the viral outbreak source, interviewing every guest who attended the adoption celebration and attempting to trace the infection's origin. The investigation raises uncomfortable questions about who might have been carrying the virus asymptomatically and unknowingly infected multiple people, including the vulnerable infant who lacked immunity. Suspicions briefly fall on various attendees who reported minor cold symptoms in days following the party. But definitive source identification proves impossible with so many potential transmission vectors present at the crowded celebration. The uncertainty torments Johnny and Chanel, who desperately want someone to blame, some target for their rage and helplessness, but instead face only the frustrating reality that sometimes terrible things happen without clear cause or villain to punish. EJ conducts his own parallel investigation through less official channels, convinced that his Demera enemies might have deliberately introduced pathogens at the celebration to harm his family. His paranoia, while seemingly excessive, isn't entirely unfounded given the family's history of being targeted by rivals. However, even his extensive intelligence network and medical consultants find no evidence of biological warfare or deliberate infection. Somebody's tragedy is simply random cruelty, rather than calculated attack. The long road to recovery. After 12 agonizing days of critical illness that push baby Tesoro to the very brink of death multiple times, his tiny body finally begins responding positively to the aggressive antiviral treatment protocols and intensive supportive care. His fever breaks, his breathing stabilizes without mechanical ventilation, and his blood work gradually shows improving numbers that make Kayla cautiously optimistic about his survival prospects. The improvement remains fragile and precarious, requiring continued hospitalization and monitoring, but represents the first genuine hope Johnny and Chanel have felt since their celebration became a nightmare. The young parents, who have barely slept or eaten for nearly 2 weeks, finally allow themselves to believe their son might actually survive this ordeal. They take turns holding their recovering baby, marveling at his resilience and fighting spirit, whispering promises about all the future moments they'll share if he just keeps getting stronger. The experience has profoundly changed them both, stripping away the youthful naivety they brought to parenthood and replacing it with the bone-deep understanding that their child's life remains fragile and precious beyond measure. Aftermath and change perspectives. When Tesoro is finally cleared for discharge after 3 full weeks of hospitalization, Johnny and Chanel bring him home to a house that feels completely different despite no physical changes. The celebration decorations have long since been removed, the uneaten cake disposed of, and the presents open quietly in the hospital rather than at any joyful gathering. The couple implements strict protocols about visitors, hand hygiene, and limiting their son's exposure to potential illnesses, perhaps overprotective, but absolutely unwilling to risk another crisis. Leo and Javi visit regularly with the new parents' blessing, their continued presence in Tesoro's life acknowledged and welcomed rather than viewed as threatening or inappropriate. The shared trauma of nearly losing the baby has created bonds between foster parents and adoptive parents that transcend legal definitions and create an extended support network, benefiting everyone involved. They joke, somewhat darkly, that they're all part of Tesoro's survival team now, forever connected by the fight to save his life. The terrifying illness that transformed Johnny and Chanel's adoption celebration into a parent's worst nightmare ultimately teaches profound lessons about family, love, and the fragile nature of life itself. While the physical scars will fade as baby Tesoro grows stronger, the emotional scars remain etched deeply in everyone who loved him through his darkest hours. The joyful celebration they planned became a disaster none could have anticipated, but somehow, through the terror and tears, their family emerged stronger, more connected, and infinitely more grateful for every ordinary moment they'll share with the son they almost lost.